You're watching, what's it called?
You're watching Wisconsin Beer on MPTV. Two. Woo!
I grew up in Wisconsin, I live here all my days. Surrounded by good people, this is where they work and play. Well, I had myself some good times, but the ones I hold most dear, the ones where I was holding a Wisconsin beer.
It was a shift in the market, and it was away from the more predictably tasting beers, the ones you identify as sort of mainstream, which are fine, but tend to be, there's not a lot of differentiation among the major labels. And I think people, 80s, 90s, and more recently, a real taste for variety, for differences. And I think that's what has driven the explosion of craft brewing. And Milwaukee has this tradition of fine brewing, so that it was an easy transition. Randy Sprecher, he came from Pabst, so there were ties between the majors and the crafts as well.
And what people forget is that beer is a very fragile commodity. You can't slosh it around on trucks and trains across the country and expect that it's going to be the quality product that it was when it was first brewed.
Wisconsin is consistently in the top 10 of craft beer, both places to brew craft beer and where people love craft beer.
People in Wisconsin are a little bit more grounded and kind of, they get things done when they get things done, and they're more purposeful and less flashy. So I think you see that in the beer.
Well, I think Wisconsin has some great craft breweries. We're very blessed here with a lot of the ones that we have in the state.
One great thing about Wisconsin craft breweries is the fact that every style that's out there, and there's 142 styles now in the industry, is made right here in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin stands out in the brewing community, I think, because of its history here. We're a beer drinking state, which lends to being a beer making state, which lends to being a great beer making state. So I just think it's that, and probably the long winters. People need something to do, so they drink and brew beer.
Wisconsin is one of the great beer capitals in America. Most Pabst, but in recent years, a number of craft breweries have made a name for themselves by brewing unique, bold beer with a distinct Wisconsin flavor. We'll take you to a select few and introduce you to the men and women behind the operations. They'll give insight about beer, along with a little history about their brewery. They'll also share what's in store for the future of Wisconsin beer. So grab a cold one and stay tuned.
New Glarus Brewing Company was started in 1993 by my wife and I. We did not really have a flagship beer. We were mainly making lager beers because my education and experiences in lager brewing. I was an apprentice in Germany, and I worked for a large brewery making lager beer. The craft brewing business was slowly moving over towards ales, and our biggest concern was we don't have a flagship beer. So in the mid-1990s, Deb and I had gone to Old World, Wisconsin, which is an open-air museum. There was a German homestead there. So we walked around this homestead, and in the root cellar they had a crock pot of beer fermenting. Being Germans, they drank beer. And I thought, that's interesting. I wonder what that beer would have tasted like. What would they have made in the 1850s? It would have been maybe made in, say, the lighter style that was becoming in vogue, the beers of Pilsen, which were light in color. All of that sort of moved me towards the idea of brewing a beer like Spotted Cow. The name, however, came from Deb. We had gone to England to get an award in an international competition, and so we were driving around in the central central Midlands of England and over hill and over dale, lots of grass fields and stone fences and sheep everywhere. No people, just sheep. And so Deb kept looking out the window saying, man, there's sheep everywhere. And she said, I bet that's what people think when they come to Wisconsin. They probably say, what's the deal with all these spotted cows? So, we drove about 5 or 10 more minutes, and she said, that would be a really good name for our new beer. So we called it Spotted Cow. And we had no idea, we make lots of beers. We've made hundreds of beers, I would imagine. And so we made Spotted Cow, and we don't really do marketing. We just brew the beer and see if it sells. And it just kept selling, so we just kept brewing it. Moon Man Pale Ale is our second biggest selling beer. And the name for that beer comes from the name of a cat. So we had a brewer here who had a tomcat named Moon Man. And he used to come to work and tell us stories about Moon Man. And Moon Man was not, or is not, like other cats. He goes out and greets neighbors. He walks with people down the street. He has a lot of personality. In a lot of ways, he's a lot like a dog. So when we were thinking about making this pale ale, Deb asked Jarrett, hey, it would be okay if we named the beer after your cat. He agreed, and Deb gave him a little can of paint and a paper plate. And so Jarrett went home and took Moon Man and put his paw into the paint and put it on the plate and brought it back, and Deb traced it. So that's his actual paw print to scale on the label. There is a resurgence of interest in local agriculture. So we like to support local agriculture mainly because it helps us to understand our supply chain, how raw ingredients are produced. That's why we're going to grow hops. And our customers that take for your food to reach you is becoming extremely important. So there's a lot of reasons why we would support local agriculture. What can we do to help make a small farm viable? And to me, that's worth supporting. Deb was invited to come out to the State of the Union to sit next to Michelle Obama, which was really cool. She had won a couple of awards, a Small Business Administration Entrepreneur of the Year and Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. So these two awards had brought her into contact with the White House. And so she was invited back to sit with Michelle Obama. And it was really cool to go to the White House. It was really an honor, really kind of awe-inspiring. Being a husband and wife working together has its special challenges. In business, you were always told you have to trust your business partners, and generally in business it's not a good idea to work with family members. I was working for a very large brewery out west, and my wife was basically tired of being a corporate wife, so she wanted to come back home to Wisconsin and said, because of all the experience that I had and she had working in breweries basically all of our adult lives, she said, why don't we go back to Wisconsin and start a brewery? So we packed up like the Beverly Hillbillies and moved back to Wisconsin.
You'll never be worthless and weak as long as you drink Wisconsin beer. You're watching Wisconsin beer, and if you stop watching, I'll come over to your house and I'll make you do push-ups.
I think with anybody's taste maturing, people wanted to drink a better beer, eat a little bit better food. And I think it's ended up almost trickling down to other, why is something better, why does something taste better, and why should I spend my money on that? Most of your microbreweries are not going to be big distributors. Even a very large micro like New Glarus rarely gets out of the state because of such a demand for their product in the state. My beer, you can't get my beer outside of the restaurants that we own. When we put our brewery up in Grafton, and we're the only brewery in Grafton, it's Grafton beer. So we have a lot of local, drink local. We're doing a lot of things with organics and natural and everything that's that's hip right now. We're even bringing back a hop crop in Wisconsin. There's local hop farmers that we're benefiting out of this. There's a couple brewers that are doing everything that's in their beer is grown in Wisconsin. Whatever the trend is, we like it, and we're happy that people are receptive to it. The beer that you're drinking, the Raspberry Weiss, I had multiple awards for that. I'm amazed how, I don't want to say easy it is to brew a really good tasting fruit beer, but we have the ability here, with not being a distributing brewery, that I can use really fresh fruit. It can be really fresh and it can really taste like real raspberries. So I won 5 years in a row at North American Brewers Association. That won a couple of gold medals. It's won a Great American Beer Festival award. I'm very proud of the amount of medals we've won with that. But also our Oktoberfest has won multiple awards, including North American Brewers and Great American Beer Festival. So those are my two of my high points.
Capital Brewery was actually founded in 1984 as a company, and they put out their first batch of beer on April 17th of 1986. We've been around for 27 years. One of the very first craft brewers around. The company was founded on the idea of honoring Wisconsin's rich brewing heritage, which is why it chose to focus on Germanic style lager beers. I think Wisconsin can hold its own against any state in the country when it comes to craft beers, not only on quality but also on varieties, the breadth of varieties that are out there. You have lager brewers like us. Lakefront brews a lot of lagers, which is kind of uncommon for craft brewers. Most craft brewers focus on ales. You got New Glarus down south doing some Belgian style beers. So, when you talk about the number of brewers there are and the variety of beer those brewers are producing, without a doubt, you can definitely say Wisconsin can hold its own against any craft beer state that's out there.
You're watching Wisconsin Beer on MPTV.
It's a great beverage to socialize with. You can have a few beers and still enjoy yourself and drive home. And there's something about it relaxes people. I remember my dad coming home and opening up that Schlitz and drinking that glass, and it seemed like every trouble he had during the day all went away. And there's just something magical about beer when you have one in your hand. It just makes you a little more of a jolly fellow. I'll give my brother all the credit for giving the best tour. When we first started out, it was kind of like a hobby, and he wanted to have some fun with it, and so he brought people in, and he always thought it was terrible to make people wait to the end. At this point in my tour, typically the attention span of people is directly proportional to how much beer they have in their glass. And so I like to invite everybody here to go back to the chalet to me, and we can fill everybody's beer up so I don't bore everybody. We also found out if you make people wait for a beer, they don't listen to you. And so you give them beer first, and then they'll listen to what things you got to say. But after you put the yeast in the beer, the best way I ever found describing what it really does is it kind of acts like a college student for about 7 to 10 days. Because all it really does is eat and then try to reproduce and eat and reproduce until all the food is over, gone, and then just rolls over and goes to sleep. We started the brewery back in 1987. We were originally old homebrewers. I moved in with my brother. I bought him a book on how to make beer. He made a batch. I thought I could do better, so I made a batch of beer. We started entering our beer in contests, started winning awards, won more awards. Friends started telling us, you should open up a brewery. When you're 20-something years old, you believe them. We couldn't get any large sums of money from banks, so we decided to do is start a brewery as small as possible. Instead of building up a large one, we built a 55-gallon stainless steel drum brewery in an old bakery in River West and sold our first half barrel on December 2nd, 1987. Last year we did about 33,500 barrels. But that's still about as much beer as Miller is probably going to spill all year long, so I don't put it in proper perspective there. The romantic part of the tour, to let you know, we've known of at least 10 couples who have met for the first time and later got married. So you never know what you get for your $7 anymore.
Wow. I'm drinking Sprecher root beer. They also make beer. I'm drinking the root beer, and you're watching Wisconsin Beer on MPTV.
Sprecher was started by Randy Sprecher in 1985 here in Milwaukee, and he had been inspired by being stationed in Germany during the Vietnam War and had had a lot of good beer that really wasn't available in the United States at the time. So when he came back, he went to school at California Davis, which is probably the premier fermentation science school in the country, and then was hired by Pabst here in Milwaukee to be a brewing supervisor. And while he was here, he was always dreaming of starting his own brewery, and the demise of Pabst kind of hurried that along for him, and he spent pretty much all he had saved up and started what was at the time one of the first small craft breweries in the U.S. I was hired in 2005 to kind of help Randy out as he wanted to spend more time back in his native California, especially the winters. They were kind of not his favorite part of being here. So after 20 years of lots of hard work, he felt like he could afford to take some time and go back to California. So I was hired to kind of help him do that. The thing that Sprecher's always been known for, if you go around different parts of the country, is our Black Bavarian, and that was probably one of the first beers that inspired Randy to make the brewery and one of his first home brews. So definitely the Black Bavarian is up there. In addition to that, our seasonal beers are always quite popular, particularly our Oktoberfest and our Maibach, which is out right now. Our fastest growing beers, which are very interesting and kind of reflect possibly the palate of the American beer drinker, are our double IPA, or India Pale Ale, and our Abbey Triple, which are Belgian style. So IPAs of all types and Belgians are pretty hot commodities in the craft beer scene. So one would expect those two to be kind of growing. Also done a lot of work in the last year with fresh hopped beers where we actually use green hops. And we started doing that with hops grown right here in Wisconsin. You have just a few hours to get them from the field to the kettle. We've been having a lot of fun doing that. So they're very unique flavored and really use some brewing techniques that go back to days when we didn't have ways to preserve things like we do today. So last year we did just a little bit south of 20,000 barrels, but I expect that could actually double this year because of the hard root beer. It's been so popular that we're actually at capacity and are planning to add on. So being a very popular root beer flavor here, especially in Wisconsin, but to some degree across the country, people have always, toyed with adding spirits of some sort, and it does make a great mixer. We've had people that say they like it with Jack Daniels. We got a lot of people that love it with things like Captain Morgan or other spiced rums. So having alcohol and root beer was really not a foreign idea, and started looking at how could we deliver an adult beverage. People are always asking for those kind of things that would be based around our root beer. So we've for years tried different ways to get at that. Many of them are very good, but many weren't practical for manufacturing. So we finally came across a method that's not unlike probably how old-fashioned root beer was done back in the early 1800s through probably the early 1900s, where it was done at home and the source of carbonation was some sort of fermentation. So it's kind of a culmination of trying to develop a flavor for adults based around our root beer and kind of that old-fashioned root beer making, technique that came from the pioneers, really. In addition to being president of Sprecher, I'm also president of the Wisconsin Brewers Guild. Well, we have two real primary missions, and that's to promote and protect craft brewing in Wisconsin. So on the promotion side, we try to get recognition for all of our breweries. We try to raise the standards of craft beer in the state, making sure that we're always talking about quality and making sure people understand how keeping tap lines clean are key to the success of all of us. So we're doing things to promote it. We have the festival here in Glendale, which is put on by the Guild, probably one of the most unique beer festivals out there, because there are actually every brewery has either the president or the brewmaster or both in attendance, and we pair up with local chefs, and you will actually have the chef in attendance. So you got some really cool people that are very creative with things you put in your mouth that you get a chance to see over here in Glendale. So that's one other thing we do. We also do many marketing things like the map of the state showing where all the breweries are, so you can take a tour. We have our Wibble program, which is Wisconsin Beer Lovers. For $30, you can get all the news from our breweries. You get a t-shirt, you get discounts at all the breweries in the state, which is, I think, is the big reason to do that. And many of them give you some other perks of glassware, openers, coolies, stuff like that. So it's kind of a program where the average citizen can be a member of the Guild and be a part of Wisconsin beer. So that's kind of the promotion side. And then Of course, we almost get in the news more for our protection side, and that's where we all often end up in discussions with legislators or other parts of the industry over aspects of how business are done that people either want to change or modify or perhaps add things to or take things away from that are of interest to all of our members. So that's kind of the protection side. And I would have to say that craft brewing is probably the neatest business I've ever been in as far as camaraderie goes. Brewers will do almost anything to help each other out. And short of sharing competitive information, brewers are just a great bunch of people and will help you out and will share things with you readily. So it's been a real fun thing to be with an organization like the Guild.
Hi, I'm Pinky the Glitterator from the Brew City Bruisers, and you're watching Wisconsin Beer on MPTV.
Started in my dad's basement probably 8 years ago. Bought a homebrew kit for Father's Day. We started brewing extract beer, and then fast forward to 2010, I won a homebrew contest that allowed me to brew my beer at the Grumpy Troll in Mount Horeb. And then the brewmaster there at the time, who is now the brewmaster of Sweet Malts in Oconomowoc, entered it in the U.S. Beer Tasting Championships, and it got honorable mention among everybody, Sam Adams to Sierra Nevada. So that kind of gave me some great hope that my beer was actually good. Quit my job maybe 2 years later and took about a year getting this thing started, and here I am. I started working on a one-barrel brewing business plan because I guess when I was getting started in this whole thing, I was looking at doing a larger setup and found that I couldn't get enough money and I didn't have enough experience. It's all homebrew stuff, it's just scaled up. So I felt most comfortable working at this level, and frankly, that's all the money I could scrounge up to get started. One barrel beers that are most popular, I would say, are No. 2 Strong Ale, which is the beer that won or got honorable mention at the U.S. Beer Tasting Championships. That is a hugely popular beer. It's a 10% Belgian strong ale, which is a rare style, but people can't get it, so they come here and they love it. It's super sweet, kind of has some prune, date, fruity flavors that people really respond to. I get a lot of comments that it's the best beer people have ever had, which I don't believe. They must not drink that much beer, but that's a pretty popular one. And then our Penguin Pale Ale, which is all our shirts, and we even have our bartenders wear tuxedo t-shirts sometimes to look like penguins. That's really popular. That's an APA that we use 20% wheat malt in, which is another kind of unique ingredient or flavor in an APA. And then our Commuter Kolsch is our light beer. It's the Miller Lite of One Barrel Brewing Company, but of course, much better. So those three beers are kind of our flagships. They're on all the time. Then we'll have a seasonal, our breakfast beer, which is an oatmeal stout, was on through winter. We're going to go to our Flemish Giant Weissen here shortly. The vast majority of our beer is available only here in-house. All of our seasonal beers or kind of unique one-off beers are going to be only found in-house here. There are 3 to 4 tap lines around Madison right now where you can currently find other beers of ours. The Vintage Brew Pub on the Madison's west side has our Kolsch right now. Cooper's Tavern on the Capitol Square has our APA full-time. They want our No. 2 Strong Ale, but it's a little bit cost prohibitive because it's a very big beer and it gets a little expensive. So we'll see that in the future maybe. And then Brasserie V on Monroe Street by the stadium has had our Kolsch on, and we're now partnering with Altera, Milwaukee's finest coffee shop. At their new Madison location, we are brewing a Imperial Coffee Stout for them and a Pale Ale for them that is only going to be on tap at their Madison location. I think a beer brings people together because it makes you feel good. It helps you get talking. I mean, there are certain societies in history that either made their final decisions based on having a sober conversation and drinking in the morning to decide if it was the right decision, or drinking at night making the decision and then waking up and being sober and deciding their drunken decision was the right decision. So our history has shown that beer just brings people together, helps great decisions be made, and it's a community space too. I mean, where do people go to drink? some people drink in their houses, but most people come to a bar and sit down and talk to their neighbors and friends. The Gentlemen's Brewing and Distilling Society is steeped in old-time lore. Actually was founded in my driveway with my neighbor Doug, and I think we're probably only 2 actual members. It's a sort of a fictitious, yet prestigious society. The motto is Veritas per Crapula, and that means the truth through drunkenness. Although here in Madison, there's a lot of professors, and I was informed that crapula is kind of like the past tense of crapulum. So really the technical meaning, apparently, is the truth through hangover. We have yet to update our slogan, but I think we're going to stick with it.
There is so much about Wisconsin beer that appeals to people. The taste, the variety, the social interaction, or state pride. But what is it about Wisconsin beer that most brings people together?
Well, they get drunk together.
I grew up in Wisconsin, I live here all my days. Surrounded by good people, this is where they work and play. Well, I had myself some good times, and the ones I hold most dear were the ones where I was holding the Wisconsin beer. With my family and my friends, the good time never ends. As long as my drink is near at hand. I grew up in Wisconsin, it's where my heart belongs. With Brewers fans across the land, I'll lift my voice in song. Now raise your glass until it's gone.